Good afternoon. Is that on or not? Stop it, Russ. Hello?
Yeah,
Hello?
I don't think
Is
so.
that on? It is on?
Could you hear me?
Well, I turned that off, but it doesn't seem like it's doing anything. That's weird. Is that volume? We should have tested this in the 30 minutes that we had. Hello? Edwin, can you hear me?
No.
No? Hello?
That's good.
Now can you hear me? I feel like that stupid commercial. I can. If you're still coming in, that's fine. Grab your pizza and come and have a seat. We want to welcome you to the poetry reading. I'd like to thank the library personnel, our librarian, Lindsay Tuman, who couldn't be here today. She's out of town at a meeting. Deanna Martin, who set everything up in the library. We also want to thank our Vice President of Student Services, Celeste Donovan, and SCCC Student Life and Leadership for funding for this event and the coffee house tonight also. A reminder, the coffee house is at 7 o'clock tonight in the Student Union. For those of you that haven't heard about it yet, it's free. We'll have coffee, lemonade, poetry, and we're going to be giving away some signed books from our guest judge, Rebecca Aronson, and contest winners will be reading their winning poetry. So you guys are welcome to come out to that, and again, that's at 7 o'clock in the Student Union. It's my pleasure today to introduce someone that I met this summer at the Sewanee Writers Workshop. Rebecca Aronson is a very talented poet, but she is also just a really cool person and really down to earth, and you're going to love her. Rebecca is the author of Ghost Child of the Atalanta Bloom, winner of the 2016 Orison Books Prize, I should have asked for pronunciation, Poetry Prize, and a finalist for the 2017 Arizona New Mexico Book Awards, and also Creature, winner of the Maine Traveled Roads Poetry Prize. She's been a recipient of the Prairie Schooner Strauss Award, the Lost Speakeasy Poetry Prize, and a 2018 Tennessee Williams Scholar at Sewanee Writers Conference. Rebecca is also the co-founder and co-host of Bad Mouth, a series of words and music in Albuquerque, which is where she lives and also teaches writing. Let's give a warm welcome to my good friend, Rebecca Aronson.
Thank you. So thank you so much for having me here. Thank you to the college and the library, and most especially to Janice Northens. I'm delighted to be here. Can you all hear me okay? Sorta? Okay. So I'm going to read, I think, 4 poems from my book, and then I've got some new stuff, so you all are going to be guinea pigs. I'm going to read some some of it written in the last year or so, and a couple of poems that I wrote last week. So, but I'm going to start with the first poem in my book called "I Was the Girl Who Set the Field on Fire," and context for this doesn't need much, but I will just say that I was pretty enamored of flame and fire as a young child, so this may or may not have happened. I was the girl who set the field on fire. Someone had left a can of lighter fluid beside the trash cans. There were plastic chairs, womanly with their smooth white arms, dry grass harrowing ankles, and small yellow moths drifting among tasseled heads. When she spun, the world tilted and blurred to a golden rush. Drops flew from the red can, became the throng of this new hour, stung and swarmed her limbs, lightly buzzing a song she knew. She lit the single match, filched from its watch house above the mantel, a rough cap flaring into sunburst, the world a slingshot flinging loose its load of unfixed colors, the pitch transformed into ripples that spread to flaming trails, concentric and growing wider around this girl, held in the thrall of her own knack. When I first started, this book was about 10 years in the making. And when I first started, one of the ways I was envisioning it was a series of museums that you could sort of enter each museum. And over time, I ended up jettisoning almost all of those museum homes, but I left a couple. And this one is the Museum of Inattention, which is a place that I sort of accidentally find myself with some frequency. Maybe you also do. The Museum of Inattention. Here is a room of forgotten sweaters, the orange silk scarf left at the Vancouver airport, single gloves leaping from pockets, some of them clutching crumpled bills. Here is a ballroom, its elegant display of expired parking meters shimmering under a dome of shooting stars. The door I almost missed was so blue, my feet fell toward it and I was in, like stepping into a puddle of sky. I must have slept on the tram to the upper levels. Here is me, turning away just as the baby reaches my legs on his first room crossing. I don't recall what floor this is. This wing is a maze of classrooms, each with a foggy window and an unmarked door, blank as a centaur's blind eye. Here's the roof garden. There I am, shaking sand free from a beach towel, and there is the birthday watch with its delicate shining strap flying loose from the frame of my noticing. Here's the bed I turned for my love in, a cluster of words, the flock of ears they fled from. Here are 2 throbbing packets of lost crushes, the unrequited ones, rudely knocking each other's edges, the ones I never knew existed, floating like cartoon ghosts through cartoon walls. The exit is invisible. Walk past it, and you'll find yourself where you usually go at this same time on a different day. All right, this next one is, it's a poem about a scruffy, old, smelly dog that we adopted a few years ago that I absolutely fell in love with. And the first time I read this poem to my husband, he said, "Is that about me?" I don't know what to really think about that, but anyway, it's called Dog. You moan in your sleep, grinding your teeth, grinding the night down to a bare leash that would snap at the lightest tug. You are dreaming your freedom in tight circles which widen a hog's hair at a time, breadth of breath that shimmies into the broad sky and is gone. Poof. Who doesn't long to disappear like a body into a hole, a magic show pigeon, a margarita? Worry wakes you 7 times, and 7 times you circle, excavating a bare path in the dense cover of your bed. There is safety in the hours of darkness, the air salty as a long buried bone. Sleep is thunderheads just past the mountain. You sense a storm panting on the horizon, your nose wet with want. Though it is heading your way, there is no knowing if it will stay the course or veer like a fox, the path foiled, far from the sure lock of your hunger. All right, and the last one I'm going to read from this book is someplace. This is a poem in which I overshare. So it's called Self-Portrait with Uterine Fibroids. I was never winged, never half-cast of horse and human, barely vengeful. Only I am marked by this distortion. Honorary gash, it bleeds me, and so depleted, I deform. I get so empty, I nearly drift on air. I make a river to hold my place. I am the river, running copper. I've gone translucent as the wing of a nymph, an apparition. My skin is paper. I mean, it is barely a cover, like a single onion skin, the pale blue leaf of an aerogram. Once, on a street corner, smiling at a neighbor, I nearly died. All the blood a body holds can leak out quickly. I'd never been so lightly tethered. I wobbled, slanted quickly toward the ground. I was a girl engulfed in flame, but now I'm spectral, misted stone. I haunt cosmetic counters, pinch my cheeks, offer wan assurances. I'm fine, I'm hardly anywhere near dead. Short intermission. All right. now for the new stuff. So, in the last couple of years, things are going to get a little dark now. In the last couple of years, my parents, who are quite elderly, started having a variety of health problems, and so these are some poems that came out of me starting to think about, I'd thought about it before, but really thinking more seriously about mortality and aging and all the terrible stuff that comes with that. So a couple of weeks ago, I was in Minneapolis, where my parents live, and I was visiting my mother, who has dementia, pretty advanced dementia, so her memory is not functioning. So this is a poem that I wrote there, called My Mother at the Gate. Oh, there is one curse word, warning. My Mother at the Gate. One more thing to know. It's an abecedarian, which is a poem that, do you all know what an abecedarian is? It's a poem where you use the alphabet as the form, and so the first line starts with the letter A, the second line starts with the letter B, etc., all on through the alphabet. So, yeah. My Mother at the Gate. After only a few minutes, I lose my cool. I swear by my left foot I'll last longer, count to 10 or 20 and breathe both in and out. I offer deals. Help me to say only pleasant things in a quiet voice, etc., and I will, and here it falls apart. What would I? Forgo wine on weeknights? Live broke, as I do, but gratefully? Whatever. Just grant me patience, hospitable syntax, and the outward demeanor of gentility. I consider meditation, therapy, more and more yoga. Just in time, I crack a joke, which sometimes helps. Sometimes kindness descends like a fever. We walk the halls, laughing at nonsense, and are briefly cheerful. My mother loved me once and knows it still. She recalls nothing of my childhood and next to nothing of hers. Ordinary tasks are either hardwired into her hands, the coffee pot placed on the counter by the stove, the toaster oven set to medium. She writes questions to ask later on a pad on the counter, or wiped into an unreadable blur. She squints as if trying to decipher her own mind, scrawled inscrutably just there. We all know memory is a farce, but still, this blankness galls. She knows in moments and feels, I'd guess, despair. Until I became a mother, I lacked imagination. Motherhood shot me into vertigo, the endless falling and fear of failing, and, God damn it, wonder. I think of the delicate silver chain she gave me once, XOXO across the front, a talisman to carry me through years. But no one thought to prepare, or thought but had no means, zero instructions ever coming close for this third rail of oblivion. Okay, these next poems, there's 4. Let me see how we're doing on time.
You're good.
We're good? Okay.
Yeah.
So these next 4 poems, so several years ago, still on the theme of my parents aging, several years ago, my father started to fall often, and we didn't know what was going on, and it turns out he was diagnosed with Parkinson's, among other issues, but so his balance was gone, and I began thinking a lot about gravity, and in fact I started reading some light physics to try and understand really what gravity is, and from that came this series that I've been working on that are letters to gravity. And so each of these next 4 poems begins Dear Gravity, and they're just contemplations on aspects of gravity and aging and etc. Dear Gravity, shall I call you Shiva? I know your pleasures, taking down an overpass, toppling a crane, you downed a space shuttle for its presumption, flick at people as we scuttle. You pulled me down once to test my brittle frame. You win. My bones are balsa and they bend only a little. It was just a prank, your attention really elsewhere. Class bully, you are picking on another nerd whose limbs stiffen like drying plaster. The rest is air, except his solid head so full he can hardly hold it. Things fall because space curves. Space curves because of matter. The body's matter displaces space a little with every step, and so he falls, my father, his mind on the curve of pavement, carefully treading on matter's ghostly shadow. Dear gravity, may I call you grave? An old tree falls after long weakening, after years of unseen hollowing, and it keeps falling, rotted core turning to damp dust, becoming earth, the body its own trench. At the doctor's office, the nurse says, I've grown shorter, only natural. I stare hard, but can't quite wipe the pleasant smile off her face. I am sinking, not quite like a ship or a deflating balloon, but like the house's foundation, or I am the house, and the clay it is built on, and eventually the unrecognizable rune. My mother's hips are out of plumb. She lists like a sailboat about to slice sideways into waves and then under. My father's head is even with my own, so he's winning the shrinking race. Imagine us becoming not just shorter, but thinner, not lying down for a last time, but disappearing altogether, like a popsicle that is melted into a stain on someone's smile. Dear gravity, on the trampoline, my son and I try to bounce each other over. We throw ourselves up and come down hard. We soar until we fall laughing and breathless to the surface. We fail to defy you over and over, and that is the game. We are bodies making room for ourselves in space, pushing the invisible curtain out of the way, nitrogen and oxygen and the other vapors ricocheting madly, as I suppose they always must do. Everything I want is here. The breaths I take easily and the purposeful displacement of matter, my body feeling itself work and doing all right. A boy whose cells are also mine. We will never win the game. We are dying of laughter, and the light is fading, and the birds have started up their evening prattle that I think must have something to say about their allegiance to air, even as they land and settle on high branches. All right, and one more Dear Gravity poem, and this one's a little bit longer. And I wrote this about a week ago. Trying to think if there's anything that you need to know. My father's in hospice now, and I was sitting in his room with him, just watching him sleep and thinking. And so this is from that, Dear Gravity. Let's say we begin and end with questions. And putting aside for now those associated with being born, my father in his bed is a wrinkle among thin blankets. His breath an engine turning over. His arms go up sometimes in his ungentle sleep as if to protect the eggshell of his skull, as if he is hiding under the desk of the world and the sirens have begun to blare. Dear gravity, I cannot say he doesn't float, despite this heaviness. He drifts in a half-sleep. He speaks in a half-tongue, such dreaming only the dying can do. The meat he asks back to his bare bones won't come from soup or cups of pudding, cajoled into the red gap of his open mouth, which has gone loose as a broken hinge. One more only. This the very last, the nurse says, spoon tilted, her own hips straight and solid. Someone so planted in the world, it would take a violence to uproot her. My father both sinks and soars in his dry, thin paper skin. His lips are red and dark, despite their roughed-up covers. Despite such poverty of moisture, they demark the entrance to the watery cave of the body. The lexicon of questions is poor in relation to that vast tunnel, the red and slightly pulsing tunnel beyond the ivory markers of his rotted and porcelain teeth. Where in that disintegrating labyrinth is the hymn that is? Not the lights that flash and blink on the body's dashboard, not the automatic systems that stutter along until they don't. Not even the voice that sometimes booms out orders, surprising the muddle of confounded mutters, the litany of small refusals whispered hoarsely in the direction of the lamp's plastic-wrapped shade. What is left, gravity, after the body has been turned to ashes, and after his imprint and stink have been replaced by someone else's, and after even the words have been spoken among friends and family, and the catered panini cleared finally away, after the urn has been placed on a mantle, where will he be? Not anywhere anyone's hand can reach for his own, which rests yet on the blanket, and through which runs a live blue vein like a mountain range at dusk, seen from very far above. Thank you. So I'm happy to answer questions. I can read more poems. What do you guys want?
I'm looking.
You can eat pizza.
You guys got questions? You want to hear more poems? Edwin? I'll let you.
Well, what got you started with writing poems? How do you connect the words? Like when you were reading, I was just trying to follow through, and it's kind of like you were reading through, but I'm not a writer, so I don't. But how do you transition from one step to another? Does it just come naturally, or you studied in school, or how did it come to be like that?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm very, and every writer has their different process, but for me, I'm very sound driven. So I kind of get a snippet of a sound or a rhythm stuck in my head, and often the combination of words that makes that sound doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense. But I kind of start with a sound, and go from there. But I also think that I also write through whatever my current obsessions are, and obsessions kind of change slowly. So, right now as I said, I'm thinking a lot about death and mortality and other dark things. And I'm finding, this hasn't always been the case, but I'm finding that actually writing is really helping me come to more kind of peace and clarity about those troubling issues. Other times I found that I can't write in the midst of emotional turmoil. I'd have to do it later in peace, looking back. But yeah, I read a lot of poetry. I think about poetry a lot. I did an MFA program where I studied poetry, and so I've spent a lot of time thinking about it and reading about it. And when I see a poem by somebody else that I'm really moved by, I try and answer that really hard question of what is it in this thing that where am I reacting? What is in this combination of words or this syntax or the rhythm or the sound? What is it that's touching me emotionally? And so I try and really pay attention to the architecture of the things I'm reading. And sometimes I try to imitate that more, not, as an exercise to see, like, can I achieve a similar kind of effect and learn that way as well? Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good question. Other questions? Yes.
New Mexico is a very special place to many folks. Can you say, Rebecca, that it has had an impact or an influence on your folks?
Yeah, absolutely. Places really seeps into my work kind of wherever I am. So my first book was set a lot in rural Missouri, which is where I was, and that landscape really seeped in. But New Mexico is absolutely, in this book, there's a lot of poems that are about drought and a lot of poems about fire or danger of fire. But also just the landscape. The landscape finds itself popping up in my poems a lot as well. So it's a great place to write. So, yeah. Other questions? Anyone have a good joke?
Well, I'll ask a question, but you guys on the back row, feel free to jump in. You mentioned you have a whole series of Dear Gravity. Are you thinking you can get a book-length question out of that? Or like, how do you know what goes in a book? Because other people might be wondering that same thing.
Yeah, I don't know how you know what goes in a book. Honestly, so my first book was very much sort of my graduate thesis, pulled together with some other stuff in. And so it was really kind of a random collection of here are poems I wrote. And the second book I wrote, as I said, over like a decade. And so the first version of it is, I think there's maybe 1 or 2 poems from that first version of it that are left. It changed a lot. But I did find that I was thinking, as I was trying to put it together as a manuscript, I was thinking about themes and trying to notice narrative arcs that weren't there when I was writing it, or not purposefully, but I began to sort of arrange it to try and bring those out a little bit. And I discarded some poems that seemed like they just didn't fit thematically. I don't think I will have a whole book of Dear Gravity poems, but the way I'm envisioning it now, because that would be an awful lot of Dear Gravity poems, the way I'm envisioning it now, I think I have about 8, and I don't know if there'll be more of them or not. I hope so. But I'm envisioning it as just a sort of recurring throughout the manuscript that I'm currently building. I'm thinking that every several pages there'll be a Dear Gravity poem, and that will just be sort of the connecting thread throughout. So, yeah.
Is there something that's way off on the horizon that you either can't quite see with clarity, or you find fearful that you think you might want to write about someday?
Oh, so many things. I don't even know. Yeah.
I only want one. You can just share one.
One. Yeah, okay. You don't want me to do like an alphabetical list?
No.
So let's see. Ants. I don't know if I can name things. I mean, I feel like the list of things that I don't understand and can't quite write about is colossal. I didn't know that I was going to be able to write about the end of my parents' life. I wouldn't have expected to be able to write about that, frankly, but it's happening. So yeah, so I don't really know. I know that in the past, writing about things has had to be an act of reflection, not something I could do in the midst of it. And so it's been taking me by surprise that I am able to write about it while it's happening. But it's also been immensely useful to me. So I hope that I'll keep finding writing useful as I encounter whatever there is to come.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
So looking at poetry or poets, it's not like a profession that somebody want to go into. Do you see a lot of people going into poetry or trying to start a business or make money out of it?
Out of poetry?
Is it something that you enjoy?
I've been waiting.
Because,
I've been waiting for the Poetry Corporation to read me. No luck yet. I mean, I do know some poets who make a living as poets. I am not one of those people. And most writers, most poets I know do something else, teaching or editing, or tech work, or something to make a living. But and if I were to advise somebody, who was interested in pursuing poetry, I'm not an especially practical person, so when I was getting degrees and thinking about what I wanted to do, I was just thinking about what I wanted to do. I wasn't thinking about how am I going to make a living. But I do think that studying poetry and being a poet is an immensely satisfying life choice, even if it's not financially a great choice. So, but I also believe that people should study things widely and try a whole bunch of different things, and that it's often good to have a job that's like outside of the field of poetry, because there are not very many jobs inside the field of poetry, but also just, it's good to have a variety of interests that gives you more to write about. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah. But if you are thinking you might want to start a poetry corporation, then I want in on that project. So, yeah.
If you want her to make money, you need to buy her
Yes,
books.
yes,
This is how
there we
poets
go.
make money. So I forgot to mention that she will have books for sale when we're done here and also tonight. So, and I know you broke students can't afford it, but adults, if you're interested, she's willing to sign them. And if students who are majoring in law or something, where you're going to make a lot of money, yeah.
Pre-med students,
So-
come on up.
Do you have more questions?
Edward, I don't agree with you. You said you're not a writer. I don't know that I completely agree with that comment. What is a writer?
He's a writer,
I think he is
because
a
I've
writer.
had him in class. You're a writer.
Yes, you are a
Yeah,
writer.
don't say that.
You're asking writerly questions,
Yeah.
so I'm assuming you are.
You start out by being a reader, and you're definitely that, but you're also a writer. Yeah,
You
I
are a
let
writer.
people that.
Well, building on Edwin's question, what would you say to someone who asks, well, what is the use of poetry? If it doesn't make money and it doesn't help us prosper as, money-making people,
Yeah.
what is the role of poetry in the world today? Because you have an MFA, so
Yeah.
what motivates you to keep writing? And in the broader sense, what do you think it contributes to the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think that poetry, like most forms of art, I mean, I think that art is a way of connection and it's also a way of widening experience and building empathy. I read poems not because I want to get practical information, though sometimes, surprisingly, they have it. I read poems because they tell you more about being human and different ways of being human. And I think poetry can I can't remember who says, maybe you know this, Janice, but who is it who says poetry is saying the unsayable? Do you know? Anyone?
I'm looking to my source.
Literature teachers?
No, we're
No?
done. Yeah.
Okay, anyway, somebody who's famous said that. And I do think that poetry is a way of getting at the stuff that's hard to talk about. That's not all it does, but I think it can do that wonderfully. And often, I know that as a reader, I know that I've found like tremendous comfort and also sometimes humor and just a sense of understanding and connection through reading poetry. So I think like so many kinds of art, it's a way of connecting to the wider human experience and stepping outside ourselves. If you're just writing only about yourself and your own emotions, that might not get you too much far outside yourself, but most people eventually get tired of that and start looking at the wider world and human experience in general. So, connection.
Like a spiritual awakening or
Yeah, possibly.
something like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Anybody else? Last chance. Well, let's, thank you so much for coming, Rebecca. And again, when we're done here, you're welcome to come up and meet her, whether or not you want to buy a book, but she does have books for sale, and the books will be for sale tonight. But please come up and introduce yourself if you have time. Let's give her a warm round of applause. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, come chat.
I think there's also plenty of pizza if you want to get some pizza and come say hi to her, or come say hi and then go get more pizza, either way. So